Okay, good evening. We are the members of the Maryland Public Service Commission, and this is a public hearing that we're having in the application filed by the Maryland American Water Company to revise its rates, charges, and tariffs, otherwise known as a rate increase request before the Public Service Commission. And as part of the process, we have public hearing over here from the company's customers about the operations of the company and the company's proposed rate increase. My name is Fred Hoover. I'm the chair of the Maryland Public Service Commission, and with me is
Chuck McLean. Obie Lacy.
they're both commissioners on the Maryland Public Service Commission. There's 5 members of the Maryland Public Service Commission. And we are hearing this particular rate application as a group, and we'll be rendering a decision actually next year. So with that, let me have the parties that are proceedings that are parties to this proceeding introduce themselves for the hearing.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Max Cook, and I'm counsel on behalf of Maryland American Water Company. I'm also joined by several individuals from the company. That includes Laura Runkle, Jeff Barton, Mike McKeever, Heidi Wagner, Simon Scarlett, and Mary Beth Leongini. I just wanted to say that we appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and we appreciate your anticipated comments and look forward to hearing from you. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Okay, Office of People's Counsel.
Good evening, Chair, Hoover, and Commissioners. Barack Miller on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel. Our office represents the interest of Maryland's ratepayers in this proceeding.
Yeah, just so that everyone understands, the statutory duty of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel is to represent the interest of the customers of Maryland American Water Company and staff.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of Commission staff. We will be participating in this proceeding. We filed testimony and we'll be participating in the evidentiary hearing coming up in January.
Okay, and again, for everyone's edification, the staff of the Public Service Commission is while they work for the commissioners, they're an independent party within the regulatory proceedings. So they will be presenting evidence on an analysis of Maryland American Water Company's rate increase proposal. And with that, let me turn it over to Amanda Best, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Public Service Commission, and she will be calling the witnesses for this public hearing.
We weren't told we were using this one, so.
I can show it on the internet. Yeah. That's so fair. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The first name we have on our list is Paula Edding.
And since we're actually taking a transcript of this hearing, so what I need you to do is not only state your name, but spell your name for the court report so we get it accurately.
All right. My name is Paula, P-A-U-L-A. Last name is Edding. That's E as in Edward, T-T as in Thomas, I-N-G. I am a resident of Bel Air, a customer of Maryland American, and the chair of the board of Bel Air Town Commissioners. So the first thing that I would ask of the Public Service Commission is that they reject the 2-tiered rate for a couple of reasons. One is that all utilities should set a fair and reasonable rate for all of the customers. And that should be related to what the cost is of producing a gallon of water. There is no data that has been provided by Maryland American that shows that using less water means that you have a lower income. That may be true on some sort of a group scale or a census tract area, but it is not true at the individual level. Maryland American has no data whatsoever as far as the income of any of their customers based on their water usage. There's not really on a common sense basis, an indicator that using less water actually means that you have a lower income. It's probably an indicator of how many people live in your home. If you're a family of 6 with 4 kids and there are a lot of baths and all that sort of thing, then you're probably going to use way more water than a single person that is living alone. Another reason to not institute this particular tiered rate is that it doesn't make sense based on Maryland American's own data. I largely agree with the arguments of Mr. Roger Colton, who I read the printed testimony that he had given in this case. Maryland American used 40 gallons per day per person for basic water service. So at a 2-person household, you're already going to be over that 2,000 tier rate. I also asked Maryland American what their shutoff rates were. I mean, I figure if you have a financial problem paying your bill and get it shut off, that is a good indicator that you don't have enough money to pay it. There were 2 shutoffs out of 21 so far in this calendar year that were folks that used 2,000 or under gallons. There were 19 out of 21 that were people that used, households that used 2,000 gallons or more. So that's an indicator to me that really the people that are going to be struggling to pay the bills are the people that are using more than 2,000 gallons, because having your water shut off at your house means that you are living in a tent with walls. It rapidly becomes uninhabitable. When I looked at the math, I know I saw statistics that the bills were going to go up some percentage, but when I looked at the actual rates for the capacity charge and the usage charge, the rates themselves are going up by close to 100%. They're going up 98%, which is an incredibly huge jump for all of our residents to pay for. The capacity charge for the under 2000s and the usage charge for the under 2000s are only going to go up by about 19%. So Maryland American said that about 35% of their customers are at the 2000 and under usage, which means that 65% of the customers are going to be subsidizing the other 35%. And that is grossly unfair, particularly since you don't know anything about the income levels of any of these people. That is an unconscionable increase. A steep increase with such a low base usage, which 2,000 gallons certainly is going to be unfair to all the customers. If the intent is to set the tiers to decrease water usage where customers have discretion over their water usage, it shouldn't be to punish water usage where there's really no discretion. And that is what this rate actually would do. Really, the best incentive that everyone has to conserve water, which is certainly is a valuable thing, is their pocketbook. I see lots of people complaining that the current rates that we are paying monthly for what we used to pay quarterly, and I think that is probably what I remember as well. That is a lot of money for folks to have to pay out. The tiered rate system also flies in the face of what I think is the way utilities and other things should set rates, which is that everyone should pay for what they use. If it costs X number of dollars to produce a gallon of water, then that should be what everyone pays. Maryland American and other utilities have a number of other ways to help out those who are strapped financially to pay for their utilities. And those are where we should look for those answers. The town is also still, we're going to probably have to submit some additional written testimony because there are some numbers that we don't have answers for. There is one number in here that we have seen that says there's going to be a 792% increase in public fire. We are not sure if that applies to us, who it applies to, or what the real numbers are on that. Private fire, thank you, private fire. So we will have to look at that. As far as the other things that are going to be expenses for the town, itself as a customer, there is going to be an increase. We have about 305 fire hydrants. We are going to have a 57% increase in the cost of those based on the numbers. It was $55,000, was what we're currently paying annually. That's going to go up to about 86,500. We have a 6-inch line when we sprinklered our town hall building. We were paying about $3,000 a year. That's going to go up to over 5,000, another 70% increase. These are very, very large increases. We will have to take a look at some of the other numbers that we have. But as far as the tiered rate, it's not going to work to have people conserve water. Everybody's going to be, any 2-person household for just their basic needs is going to be over the 2,000 gallon limit. Maryland American use, I think, 40 gallons per person per day, which is a very, very low rate. I think the EPA uses somewhere between 80 to 100 is the average usage for a person per day. So I don't want to envision a future in the town where people are concerned about whether they're going to go over that number, just in using their basic amount of water that they need to flush toilets, to take showers, to do cooking. It is a 98% increase is just terribly huge. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you want to supplement the comments you want to make, you can talk to Amanda after the hearing about how to file, because we have a specific docket where information can be filed, and then we'll see it as part of our decision making
Correct.
process.
I did see it on the website.
Okay.
I will consult with her. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next on our list is Jake Taylor.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the town of Bel Air. My name is Jake Taylor. I serve as one of the Bel Air Town Commissioners, and I rise tonight to speak in opposition to the rate hike proposed by Maryland American Water. For our court reporter, my name is spelled Jaketyllor. I am deeply concerned about the rising cost of living faced by the people that I represent in the town of Bel Air, as well as those in surrounding Harford County. Price of water, as we know, is not controlled by the market. It cannot be, as the purveyors of water infrastructure, in this instance, Maryland American, hold a monopoly on the distribution of the commodity in question. To step in for the marketplace, which would police against price gouging by presenting competitive alternatives to consumers, the state of Maryland relies on this board, the Public Service Commission, to stick up for ratepayers and make sound, equitable decisions. You've heard and will continue to hear sound, thorough economic arguments as to why this rate hike is unnecessary. I will leave those arguments to those better suited and better armed to make them. However, I do feel it is necessary for me to articulate the impact that this unnecessary rate hike would have on those who are feeling the current cost of living crisis the worst, and to challenge a popular narrative set forth during the prosecution of this case. Maryland American has claimed that the two-tiered nature of their increase is aimed at collecting more from those with means. Of course, Maryland American has no way of means testing their customers, and so they've decided that more water usage is directly correlated to one's ability to absorb increased cost. They've yet to present compelling evidence to support this point, likely because the evidence does not exist. How could it? Consider the financial position of household A, a retired couple with 40 years of matched 401ks, a maxed out Roth IRA, and a paid off house. Now imagine household B, a young couple with 2 children and another on the way, who finally saved up enough money to move out of their first apartment and get that 30-year mortgage on a 3-bedroom townhouse. Which household, imagine, is more financially secure with greater assets and fewer liabilities? Which household uses more water, on the other hand, with more heads to shower and more thirst to quench? Does the fact that household B has 2 members that can't yet take showers and must take baths, which of course use more water, mean that they're more well off? Does the fact that they run their dishwasher and washing machine 3 times as often during the week to accommodate 3 times as many dirty dishes and 3 times as many stained sports uniforms mean that they can afford a rate increase? Where in the expensive chaos of these 2 parents and their 3 children does their increased use of water suggest that they are wealthier than our friends, the empty nesters, who after years of hard work and diligence are now able to spend the coldest months of the year in Florida, not using any water whatsoever in their Maryland home? It must be obvious that the goal of this 2-tiered rate is not to tariff higher those who can afford a greater rate. Rather, the goal here plainly stated is to punish those who use more water, no more, no less. Now, conservation is a noble and worthy goal, But we cannot do it by punishing and harming those the most who can afford it the least. I just wish that we could be honest about our goals here and the methods that we're using to achieve them. I have no qualm with a company whose goal it is to make profit. And I have no qualm with a company who feels compelled to advance a chosen social mission at the director of its shareholders and leaders. That's how our system works. However, when the public is forced to foot the bill at the advancement of that mission without recourse or competitive alternative, it becomes incumbent, on the Public Service Commission to stick up for the ratepayer and deny superfluous and unwarranted rate hikes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our list is Reverend Blaise Sedney.
My name is Blaise Sedney. It's Blaise, Blaise, Sedney, Sedney. I live here in the town of Bel Air and am a ratepayer. I am also a CPA and have a master's in finance, and I'm chairman of Harco Credit Union, which is headquartered here in Bel Air, and also a ratepayer as well. I have a number of points to make, and we'd like to start off with just some basic facts. So Maryland American Water Company is a wholly owned subsidiary of American Water Works Company, which is a public company. It's on the New York Stock Exchange. It's a $5 billion company this year, and it has profits of over $1.2 billion this year, which means it's got 22% after-tax profits. They only make revenue from their subsidiaries, many 74 or something like that, that are all regulated, that all are not allowed to make more than, the highest I saw was 10.69%. And then they also do contracting with the military, which also limits their profits. And so their profits are all limited, but yet the corporate level makes 22%. Why is that? And I think this is very important because this goes back to the Supreme Court case, both of Hope and Bloomfield, about making reasonable profits for utilities. In those cases, it wasn't that those companies were subsidiaries of another corporation that was making big profits. And you say, well, how can that happen? Well, one of the larger expenses on the income statement of Maryland American Water Company is paid to American Water Works Service Corporation, which is another wholly owned subsidiary. Nowhere is that looked at. How much profit does that service company make? Yet it's one of the largest expenses paid for by Maryland American Water Company. How much profit and how much of that profit is carried up to the parent corporation? Another very important thing, and I think the People's Council gave wonderful testimony to some of these things, is the fact of how much debt and how much equity a company should have. And the amount that is currently in the presentations is that 45% debt and 55% equity would be the correct amount. The problem with that is if you look at the public water companies, including American Water Works Company, they run 58% debt. And they even say in their published materials, they try to keep between 55 and 60% debt, as opposed, and then equity being 40 to 45%. The reason that is so important is because the debt interest is much lower than what they're able to make on their capital. And it would substantially change the rate. And that needs to be looked at across the water companies, because that's a huge factor. A utility that has a monopoly, which they have here, because there's no power company that has the kind of monopoly, because you can do solar or you can get power delivered from other people. We have to buy our water from them. I wanted to drill a well in the state of Maryland. If there's public water available, you are not allowed to drill a well on your property. So we are stuck. We need to be protected with their rates. The rates that we pay for Bel Air is 3 times as high as what Harford County pays for the surrounding county. The Harford County is done by the municipality. 98% of the water delivered in this country, public water, is done by municipalities. It's only a small portion that's done by
by companies that are private for profit. And the reason is because there is a built-in profit mechanism. And so that profit mechanism needs to be looked at. Another important factor that should be taken into account is what percent debt is paid. So there's an interest expense on Maryland American Water Company's financial statement that we, the ratepayers, pay. When the last big rate increase took place 6 years ago, which I believe was at least 39%, it was because they had to build a reservoir, and they really did. That was very important to the town. And it was a $15 million expense. They went out and borrowed at 6%, when instead they could have talked to the town, and the town could have done a bond probably at 1.5%. But who did they borrow that money at 6% back then, which in 2018, that was a high rate. They borrowed it from another wholly owned subsidiary, American Water Works Capital Corporation. So all that extra interest was actually paid up that way. So the ratepayers were paying for that then went to that 22% profit. They are in the top 8% of S&P companies in terms of profit. The other companies that make 22% or more are your tech companies, your Microsofts, your Amazons, your Metas. But yet there's this utility that makes 22%. Across the board in S&P companies, the average after-tax profits is 13%. So why is that? How can it possibly be that the parent corporation can make that kind of profit? And I think that that is something that's missing because people keep looking at that Supreme Court argument and don't look at who they were talking about in terms of shareholders. It was never as a holding company. I think that's an important point that needs to be looked at. Another factor is that there's a dividend that was paid in 2024 of over $400,000 from the wholly owned subsidiary up to its parent, which you're allowed to do. But if that cash would have stayed in Maryland American Water Company, it could have been used to finance much of what it's currently using debt for. And so they should definitely run the corporation for the benefit of the town at a reasonable profit. I have no problem with capitalism and making a reasonable profit, but it's got to be reasonable. When you get up to 22%, in the testimony of one of the people from the People's Council, he said it very well, that they are taking the money from the ratepayers and giving it to the shareholders. And that's truly what is happening in this case. Another thing that was in the testimony of Maryland American Water Company was about affordability. And there was a whole study done. There's a whole lot of testimony about it. However, in that calculation, what they did for household income is use the total state of Maryland, which is for the state of Maryland is about 130,000 household income. But that's because you've got Howard County and Montgomery County and Anne Arundel County. But actually here in Bel Air, the median household income is about 80,000. There's a huge difference. And also in that study, it was quoted that 2% of the median household income is the appropriate amount. However, if you go out on the website of American Water Works, they'll tell you it's 1% is the appropriate amount. So even the testimony of their own employee says something different than their own website as to what's an appropriate amount. So they say that the consumers will only have a 38%. They have the chart that says 38%. But ultimately, if you look at all the increases, it's going to be at least 48%. That 48% is paid by the citizens of Bel Air. Because if the town has to pay all that additional money for the fire hydrants, the town has no other way to get revenue than from who? From the town of Bel Air. If the commercial entities have to pay more for water, as it shows they're going to, where do you think they get the money to pay that bill? They're going to raise their prices, whether it's the dentist office, whether it's independent brewery, or anyone else who uses water in Bel Air, they're going to have to raise their prices for that. And also in terms of the use overall in the fire department, where it said that we'll cap the expense at 50% increase. But then the actual quote from Maryland American Water Company is that they will cover that part that's not covered because of the cap by charging the other customer rate classes, which means they actually anticipate to move that money over and charge the customers. So it's extremely important that all of this be looked at appropriately. One of the other things that I thought is concerning is the fact that when this process happens, and you gentlemen are probably best at looking at this and suggesting changes to it, is that everything, you had to show up by September 7th in order to be part of this case. The town of Bel Air, who represents the citizens and also all the water bills that they pay, weren't even informed about the amount of this rate increase until September 9th. I think part of the rate filing process should be that a notice is sent to all ratepayers. Today, they send out emails all the time talking about different things, wanting you to buy insurance on your water pipes and all these other things. They could have sent an email out back in August, letting us all know that there would be a rate increase. Historically, at this meeting, there were many more people who would show up, and unfortunately today, there weren't because of the notices that were put in at the point that they were put in, and they are the legal notices, I realize. However, there was no article put in our local paper like there used to be. And so therefore, there's very few residents here. But if they were aware of it, I'm sure they would have shown up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our list is Gavin Hanley.
Good evening, members of the Public Service Commission. My name is Gavin Hanley, Gavinhanley. I'm a lifelong resident of the town of Bel Air. I was recently elected to serve as a member of the town of Bel Air Board of Commissioners. I'm speaking tonight in opposition to the proposed rate increase, tiered usage system, and the cost recovery mechanisms introduced by Maryland American Water Company. I'll do this by highlighting some of the testimony made by members of the People's Council. The Advanced Treatment and Compliance Rider would allow the company to recover costs from capital investments and expenses needed to comply with environmental, health, and safety mandates on a semi-annual basis, rather than solely base rate cases. The company proposes that ATCR will be used to address new PFAS standards, yet the company expects to receive $6.5 million in funding from the Maryland Department of the Environment through this fiscal year to address emerging contaminants, which includes PFAS. Compliance with environmental, health, and safety mandates is something that the company has always had to consider, and even with new mandates being implemented, the company has access to federal, state, and settlement resources to support PFAS-related compliance. The ATCR is projected to add $16.68 to the typical resident's bill in the next 2 years, in addition to all the other rate increases. The Distribution System Infrastructure Charge, DSIC, would allow the company to recover costs associated with mains, meters, and hydrants, also on a semi-annual basis. This would shift significant risk from the company to ratepayers because of the broad scope and proportion of the costs that could be recovered, and effectively gives the company unrestricted authority to recover distribution system investments costs without oversight or procedural checks. The DSIC would also shift the company away from historical test year rate making, because the majority of capital expenditures would ultimately be recovered through the DSIC. Without historical test year rate making, the company no longer has the incentive to keep costs in line with current rates, as the company would now be able to pass through costs directly to customers on a semi-annual basis. Both the ATCR and the DSIC would reduce the company's need to file general rate cases, which as a result would weaken the Public Service Commission's oversight, undermining regulatory transparency. I respectfully request that the Public Service Commission reject the proposed rate increases to tiered usage system and cost recovery mechanisms to ensure the residents of Bel Air are receiving a fair and reasonable rate for our most essential public utility. Thank you.
Thank you.
The final name on our list is Michael Gilbert.
Okay, so those are all the individuals who pre-signed to testify, but if anyone has, come out tonight and would like to offer comments, feel free, just go over to the podium and again, tell us who you are and spell your name and offer any comments you want to make.
Good evening. I put in a request to speak earlier this morning, and I got a confirmation, but my name is, yes. So anyway, I got the opportunity in my morning, so that's good. So my name is Stephen Chismar. That's Steven, last name is Chizmar. Okay, so I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. I've lived in town my entire life, and as far as I can remember, we've always had excellent water service. I cannot remember ever not having water interrupted for any significant period of time, and the quality of water has been excellent. And I am also a town commissioner within Bel Air, and I want to keep it that way. That is my goal. So I stand before you today as a member of the Board of Town Commissioners to speak on behalf of the residents and businesses in our town. Prices are rising across the board and all commodities, and an increase in our water is inevitable. I understand that. However, I feel that a 47% increase in the cost of water is pretty eye-opening. It really blindsides us. So we need to take a hard look at what's driving these increases and whether they are justifiable and whether the costs are reasonable compared to the costs of other companies in the state. So I'd like to address some specific concerns I had when I was reading over the proposals and the testimony about the rate increases. Maryland American is requesting a rate increase to pay for the $22.6 million already invested from 1 February 2019 to 30 April 2025. That was per testimony of Ms. Anna Kazasi. I pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry. Okay. But Exhibit 1 that they provided, labeled financial statement information, shows all debts and loans outstanding, which totals up to approximately $22.6 million that they say they need to recoup. However, this list includes 3 long-term loans, which were issued prior to 1 February 2019. That total $11.695 million. Specifically, 2 loans were issued, one in June. 2 loans were issued in 2018, one in June for $3.3 million from the state revolving fund, and another one in August for $3.395 million. And a third was issued in October of 2007 for $5 million. So why were loans issued in 2007 and 2018 to cover costs for to cover the cost of improvements from 1 February 2019 to 30 April 2025? It seems that those costs for those loans should have been included in the last rate increase in 2019. So in 2019, Maryland American requested a rate increase to construct the Vine Run impoundment pond. Something we needed. The rate increases was to cover the costs associated with the pond construction, infrastructure, etc., and operations and maintenance. In other words, it was supposed to cover a fully functioning project. Okay. So the question I have is, are any of the revenue of these rate increases paying debt on the impounded project construction, operations, and maintenance? And if so, why? The 2019 rate increase should have covered all those costs. So the other question I have is, we started paying on those 6 years ago. And how much time is left on that debt? We have not been able to get an answer on that. What to cover the cost of the impoundment. So what happens to the revenue once the debt is paid? So the revenue going to principal and interest on those debts, are we going to get a decrease in our rate once those debts pay? So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. or explain to the public. Maryland American is also asking for a 30% rate increase in water meter usage. It's not clear to me whether the cost to replace the meters are part of the rate hike or to be paid via the DSIC, which they are requesting. The testimony states that the meters would be part of the DSIC. However, Exhibit 1 shows that there's over $2 million in meter costs and meter installation costs in the 12-month test year that they cycled through. So it seems that the test year costs are being used to set the new rates, as that was my understanding. But meter replacement is being requested as part of the DSIC. So which is it? Is it into the regular rate increase that they're giving us, or is it going to be funded through the DSIC? It seems to be in both bins. Would like clarification on that. I also understand that the expenses and revenues for a 12-month test year are used as a basis for any rate increase. And that 12-month test year ended 30 April of 25. The in-service actuals table provided as part of Ms. Kazassi's testimony shows actuals ranging from 1.5 million to 2.8 million from the years 2019 to 2024. However, in 2025, the actuals rose to over $7 million. I would like to ask that they look at those expenses and decide whether the test year that they chose, which includes the $7 million actual expenses, will be considered a typical or fair test year to base our rate increases on. Another issue that they brought up was non-revenue water sources. Right now, they provided testimony that at least 15% of our water does not generate revenue because it's either lost or used for for cleaning and whatever of their facilities. That's a lot. We're losing a lot of that's 15%. So we need to take a look at that. They need to prioritize that. They need to get that down at least 7 to 10% lower than what they have now. 5% is probably something reasonable for using for maintenance that they don't charge water for. But we're losing a lot of water into the ground. That needs to be fixed. And that will help reduce the rate increase. And last, I'd like to point out that the Severn rate increase is only 37%. A full 10 percentage points below that of Bel Air. And Severn is in a higher cost area compared to Bel Air. So even though Severn is considered a newer system, it too can present problems according to the testimony that was provided by Ms. Kazassi. She also stated that over 92% of the mains in Severn are cast iron, similar to what a lot of the mains are in Bel Air. So that's part of a lot of the problems. So then why is Bel Air's rate increase 10% higher when Bel Air and Severn's water systems are, quote, similar? Well, I thank you for listening and considering the points I had mentioned. I know this is a difficult decision, but it will impact thousands of residents and businesses in our town. My colleagues from the town have been, and I have had many discussions on this issue, and I just want to state that I fully support their views as they briefed them to you tonight. Thank you for your time. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you. So anyone else who didn't pre-sign but would like to offer any thoughts? Well, actually, so just go ahead and head over to the podium and just state your name and spell it for us and tell us what you think.
Thomas Lipka, THOMAS LIP as in Paul KA. Homeowner for 38 years, Bel Air. Thanks to GB Chat. I've been sitting here listening. Everyone had time to present their case. So I basically had about 15 minutes. But thanks to GB Chat, I looked up the average cost of water in the United States. They range from 0.005 to 0.01. We currently are paying, when I just did my bill, 0.0139. So that automatically we're at 40% higher than the highest average. When I broke that down to $1 per month cost on my 159 gallons per month. If I take the low end, my bill would have been $26.18. If I take it on the high end average, $52.36. I'm currently paying $73.19 for the same amount of gallons. Plain and simple. It's simple math. Thank you.
Thank you. So, anyone else? Once, twice. Okay, well, I would thank everyone for coming out tonight. The comments you made tonight do become part of the official record, and it's what will be part of our what we will analyze and consider when we make the decision. And as I mentioned to the chair of the town commissioners, if the town has other information they want to provide to us during the course of the hearing, feel free to supplement the comments you made tonight. So with that, we're adjourned.